Tribe. Welcome to Bitcoin for Peace. I have somebody here who is a holder of 8 US patents. He is a Bitcoin educator and the founder and CEO of Barefoot Mining. Welcome, Bob Burnett. What's up, my friend?
Hey, great to see you, Valerie.
So glad you're here. And thanks for taking time to talk about all the things that we mentioned. We're going to be talking about the top 5 threats that we think are facing the future of Bitcoin. And yeah, let's get started. Do you want to just share a little bit to the audience, like who you are, what's your scoop, what's your big mission on planet Earth?
Sure. Well, I'm an older member of the Bitcoin tribe.
Yay. Me
I've
too.
yeah. I've been involved in technology related stuff going way back into the 80s, even the early part of the 80s. I probably most notably spent time with Gateway, the personal computer company.
Mhm.
For those of you who are around in the 90s and
I remember
2000s,
Gateway.
yeah. So we were known for our cow spotted boxes, and but I was blessed to have an opportunity to be there for 14 years. Served as the chief technical officer there, so I led the product development, not just for computers, which I think what people remember, but we did plasma TVs, we did MP3 players, we did digital cameras, and so it was really a blessing to have lived through what I believe to be one of the most important technological inflection points in history, which was the
Mhm.
personal computer. Because you can argue, which we won't today, and it's not the topic of today, but if you look at technology inflection points, the internet doesn't happen without the personal computer. So, I mean, I would make the argument. I was involved kind of with both, but without the penetration of hundreds of millions of personal computers around the world, the internet never has its base upon which to grow. And I actually
Mhm.
kind of view, for a lot of the Bitcoin folks here, um, it's it's very I think the PC is kind of was like the base layer of the internet in a way,
Mhm.
and much like so it's not surprising I live in the mining world, um, at the base layer, right? So that's what
Yeah.
I do. I'm sitting at the base layer. So for whatever reason, I think I've always gravitated to kind of those foundational pieces of technology that other things get built upon. And I've been
Well,
in Bitcoin since 2017. And Barefoot Mining, we're kind of a contrarian mining company in that I believe public mining is actually bad. That it's a bad course for the industry. I will not take my company public, and I say that, by the way, as a person who was part of taking Gateway public, and we became a
mhm.
Fortune 200 company, so 25,000 employees, 10 billion in revenue.
Wow.
When I was there, for those of you who don't know how big we were, but it was a big company. By the way, that our company alone, and I don't mean this in like a flex or anything, but just to put the perspective in that the Gateway Gateway's maximum revenue was equal to the entire mining industry in 20. In other words, Gateway's 1 year of revenue was equal to the entire mining industry, all the companies, public and private combined. So that's, so I think we think in our Bitcoin world about the big companies, but there really are no big companies yet. Um, but anyway, our company is a small, privately held company. I believe in small scale mining. So our mission is to um, build as many small sites in what I call the horse class size over the world using different energy sources. And we think it's a great way to make money, but we also think it's a great way of creating a level of defense for the network that is much less exposed and much more, resistant to attack than, let's say, the big guys.
Totally. Well, it's interesting when you were just mentioning about, the internet wouldn't be what it is without, all these millions and millions of personal computers. And I think about nodes and I think about obviously all the miners. And
Yeah.
if there's just one chunk, then it's not going to be this big decentralized, safer network for everybody to participate in. And so I see that analogy for sure. Um, let's get into um, the 5 things that we're gonna, think that are,
Sure.
threats for the future of, the viability of Bitcoin. Originally, I'd pinged you. We were talking about ordinals. So do you want to let's jump into that first, and we'll take maybe 10 minutes on each of these,
Okay.
subjects, if that's okay. So let's,
All right.
for people who don't, folks who are listening who may or may not understand what's an ordinal or an inscription and why it could or could not be a threat for the future of Bitcoin. Maybe you want to let's talk about that.
Okay. So the concept of an ordinal is based on a belief. We'll talk about why this is not true in a minute, but
Hmm.
I'll do my best to give justice to the opposing side. That Satoshis, can be identified individually
Hmm.
and also ordered. So the word ordinal is actually a mathematical term. So
Okay. Hmm.
if Valerie and I do a 100-meter race and she beats me, she came in first and I came in second. So that word first is really it's a way of ordering things. So you can come in 10th place. It could be your 10th wedding anniversary, whatever. That type of word is called an ordinal word.
Hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
There's another type which is called a cardinal word or a cardinal number. Okay. So
Okay.
a cardinal spelled like the bird, or a Catholic cardinal spelled
Uh-huh.
that way. That is a number like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a counting number, and it refers to the size or amount of something. Okay, so you have these two things. Now,
Okay.
um, in general, you can only be one of the two. Like they're somewhat mutually. Something is either cardinal or ordinal.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So, in other words, if I say I weigh 200 pounds, um, that that 200 is a cardinal number, right?
Hmm.
And it's expressing my weight. If I guess we've said it before, but if there's a running race and somebody comes in third, the third is an ordinal number. Okay, so there's a belief by a certain contingent of people that we can apply a system going back to the beginning of Bitcoin from the very first block, and we can say all the sats that have been generated can be uniquely identified and placed in an order. So it is an attempt to put in ordinal quality, hence the term ordinals,
Hmm.
two sats, two satoshis.
Okay.
And then by extension, there would be a belief that certain sats that are aligned with certain events may have certain qualities or value that differ from other ones. The most notable recently being, well, the
Hmm.
halving occurred, so quote unquote, the first sat of that block has a huge value. Somebody bought it for 33 Bitcoin, right?
I know.
That was, and I
Like,
think that was I think the tweet storm that you talked about that I found myself in the middle of was because, and this is a good transition point, because I said, no,
yeah.
I said, this is sad. I can't remember my exact terms, but I basically said, this is sad. And by the way, it's wrong.
Yeah.
And, and it's, I got myself, in a tiff with a bunch of people about it. And because, first they tried to tell me I'm wrong. And I'm summarizing my perspective of this, but I think some people tried to say I was wrong. Then they kind of backed off of the "you're wrong" to, well, we believe it to be true. It's our abstraction. Leave us alone. Okay. To which I responded, no, I will not leave you alone. And
Yeah.
the reason is, and by the way, several others, I think they'd be okay with me saying it. people like Parker Lewis and I are very aligned on this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Marty Bent, Matthew Crater from Bitcoin University, um,
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Song. So anyway, I don't want to go on and on, but there are people. I'll let each of you decide individually whether or not the people I just mentioned, you can throw me in or out, whether we're coming from a proper understanding of Bitcoin and the right ethical, moral perspective of it, which is what
Yeah.
I believe this is, that this is
Yeah.
an ethical, moral issue.
Yep.
And so, so basically, why do I care? Why do I care? So kind of step out of it a little further. So I had I think this is the best way to phrase it. I had a chance about 6 months ago, do something I hadn't done in like 45 years. And I reread 1984,
Ooh.
Orwell's 1984. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of things struck me. Um, and if you look at 1984, kind of central theme within the book is newspeak. And so a lot of you may not have read it in a long time,
Yeah, it's
but
been
I'm
a
sure
minute.
almost, yeah,
Yeah.
but I really, by the way, highly recommend you do it. It's not a long read. You can do it in one weekend. And if you're a Bitcoiner, you're going to read it, and I think you're going to go, wow. Like, you may have read it when you were 17 or 22, and
Mm-hmm.
now you read it, however old you are, but maybe through the lens of Bitcoin, it's going to strike you in a different way. I promise you.
Okay.
But Newspeak was the attempt to co-opt the language, literally co-opt the language. And there was an attempt to dumb down the language. So, what they were trying to do was reduce the vocabulary. And then there was this concept of double think, okay, which is simultaneously believing two mutually contradictory ideas. Okay. And
Okay.
by the way, this is where I sit right here. That ordinals, what they're trying to do is they're trying to say they can create order in sats. But the truth is, there is no such thing. And I know this will be, for those of you who haven't studied this, there is no such thing as a sat. A sat is a unit of measurement of the value of a UTXO. Okay. So, in other words, maybe to put it more in simple terms, I said earlier, I weigh 200 pounds. Okay. Well, a pound and a sat are the same thing. It's a unit of measurement. Okay. So when I say I weigh 200 pounds, there's no way of dividing up my 200 pounds, right? I am a complete body of 200 pounds. A UTXO of 1,000 sats is just that. It's not 1,000 individual items, which are Satoshis. It is just a single entity valued at 1,000. Maybe I should
Okay.
stop there, and I don't know if there's anything that lacked clarity there.
No. Okay. So then, yeah, I'm getting the difference. But so let's talk about like why is this a threat? Like why is the
Okay.
concept of having ordinals being, some people are saying spamming, the blockchain. It's saying that it's, forcing people to put things on there, that they don't want to. So,
Yeah.
why could this be a problem? Like when this first came out, what was it, a year ago ish, or
Yeah.
maybe more? Um, I remember getting on a spaces with Casey and some other folks because I wanted to learn about it. I'm like, what is this? Is this something that could be cool and beneficial? And I thought to myself, I was like, well, what if someone's creating this, a JPEG of child porn or something negative that could be like all of a sudden everyone's getting forced to put this on their nodes. And then all of a sudden the government comes in and says, you guys have to shut the whole Bitcoin network down because everybody who's running a node now has a JPEG of child pornography or something like that. That was my biggest fear, right when this first started. Um, and so can you speak to that? And is that something related to the issue, or like what is the biggest
Well,
threat that ordinals face gives to the future of Bitcoin?
so to me, the biggest threat, I'm going to go back to the double think. Okay.
Mhm.
So if what gets perpetuated to the 99.9% of the people who have yet
Mhm.
to enter the Bitcoin world
Mhm.
is an understanding that Satoshi is not a unit of measurement, but that it is a thing and it has ordinal qualities. Okay. That is a definition of Satoshi diametrically opposed to the way that Bitcoin really works. So it is in 1980, like I was saying, in 1984 terms, it is an attack on the very understanding and terminology of the network. And it prevents people from understanding how Bitcoin really works. It creates confusion. So to me, that we start there. Like, hey,
Okay.
if what we're doing is we're creating something that perpetuates a lie, then we're really in trouble. Now we can go to the next stage about spam and all the other stuff, but let's just start there. Like an ordinal is an attack on the vocabulary and the
Mhm.
ability of the world to understand Bitcoin properly. So the reason my voice is becoming more forceful with this is that I'm seeing too much of it. And in
Yeah.
fact, a lot of what's interesting is the proponents of ordinals, whether that's Casey or Udi or some of these other people,
Mhm.
I'll say this: they are not technically illiterate people who
Mhm.
don't understand what I just told you. They are deciding to promote an understanding that's contrary to the mechanisms, and they are doing so under the guise that they can just say, well, this is an abstraction. That's how they respond to me. Well, this is an abstraction. It's so if we believe it, and go away because people are believing in it and investing in it. I feel badly for the people investing it because I think they're going to get wrecked. But
Yep.
what I really care about is the people that they're bringing into the Bitcoin world are being sold a perspective of Bitcoin that's completely inconsistent with the way it actually works. Number one, obviously, I care about people getting wrecked. Um, I care about now some of the things you asked about, like when you start throwing JPEGs and you throw these things, which is more that's more the inscription side.
Mhm.
So, but inscriptions are built on ordinals. So you kind of have this stage that the ordinal is kind of the base layer of what they do, and then the inscription and a lot of these other things um, rely on that base.
Mhm.
So, but what an inscription is doing is it's throwing extraneous data into the network that is clogging the network. It can bloat. It can make it so that it gets more and more difficult to run nodes in the future. But I'll tell you the thing that really bothers me the most about it, and I mean I feel badly saying this because I've always respected Sailor and MicroStrategy. Their announcement yesterday really bothers me about this identification, because the reason it bothers me the
Yep.
most is they have decided to exploit, I don't know other way to say it, they've the what's often called the witness discount, which is they're going to shove this data into an area of a transaction and pay, in my opinion, 1/4 of what they should be paying, even if I'm not even setting aside moral judgments about what's right or wrong, whether they should be doing it. If they are doing it, and I would say this to the inscription guys, come on, at least have the gumption to not rip off the network and pay for the services that the network is providing to you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's ultra disappointing, and I feel, I talk obviously this podcast is called Bitcoin for Peace, right? And I do believe
Yes.
Bitcoin is a tool. Sound money is a tool for a peaceful world. And if we're running on a violent system of fiat and endless centralized money printing, we can never have a peaceful world ever. And
Yeah.
I don't believe so. And when I see humans, even though like a lot of people think, oh, Bitcoin's this end all be all, it's going to make the world a better place. Yes. And human nature still exists. Greed
Yeah.
still exists. Stupidity is rampant.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
and so I hear you when I heard that, and I'm like, oh God, it's just disappointing because I think, I came into Bitcoin because of the human rights use cases and learning from Alex Gladstein and Human Rights Foundation. I was like, whoa, okay,
Yeah.
let's focus on how to use this thing to spread, freedom and opportunity. And so when I see people, I get number go up, yay, let's do that. But then when you start seeing it bastardized, and that's just like, oh God, how do we help people get back into their hearts and into
Yeah.
a place of understanding what the true essence of why Bitcoin was created as a
Yep.
peer-to-peer, system? And so
Yep.
it seems like it's blocking the peer-to-peer functionality. What we saw when when the halving happened and all those the prices went up for fees and everything. And I'm just like, how is this helping somebody in a developing nation who needs this as a tool for life or death,
Yeah.
and so I want to like appeal to the people who are, the speculators and the spammers and the people who think like, oh, this is just for us to go make a bunch of money. And I'm like, this is a revolution, you guys. Like, I don't know. So it is
Yeah.
it kind of breaks my heart to see
It
that.
does. I mean, I think, I've been around the block a long time, and you're obviously, a mature person who's lived life. We're not going to get there on some primrose path
No.
without challenges, right? So
Yeah.
I really like the title of your show, and I like the perspective about approaching peace and doing it, with peace as maybe a central theme. I think that's a key piece of what I want. I
Yeah.
want peace for my grandkids. I want
y-
freedom for my grandkids.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of what I do, come on shows like this to fight for it.
Yeah.
And I think there's this interesting thing that I found. The tweet that started, connected you and I, which was about the ordinals, was
Hmm.
it got, for me. I don't have this massive social media footprint, um, but it was probably one of the larger responses to any tweet I've done, um, and I think the predominant messaging I got, even like DMs on a private basis, was, "Don't worry about it." Even people that were supporting me. So there's kind of like three camps, right? There are the people who were vehemently opposed to it. Like Udi, for instance, got very aggressive to me. And by the way, um, go if those of you interested, you can find it in my feed. But like Udi comes out and says, "This is an attack, and you are losing." And he's referring to, this is an attack on Bitcoin. They are openly admitting that what they are doing is not in the best interest of Bitcoin.
What
So
a Ugh.
yeah, so you guys go. I mean, you make your own decision, but they're overt about it, right? Number one. So, but there's a group of people who think it's good, or they want to participate in it, or no, and I'm wrong. Okay, fine. There's another group like Parker that jumped on to what I was saying, and he's got his own strong voice and been very supportive, and we've done some things together to fight it. But what's interesting is, you know what the biggest group was? The people in the middle who would maybe like my tweet and then send me a DM or a private message of some sort and say, I hear you, Bob, but don't worry, it's all just going to go away. These guys are going to run out of gas, and they're going to run out of money, and you don't have to worry about it. You go, well, the theme of this show was about attacks of Bitcoin, we didn't even put this on the list, right? Biggest one is apathy. Like,
Yeah.
like
Ugh,
if
yeah.
you
It'll be
think,
6 things, yeah.
yeah, if you think that that it's not going to be necessary to fight, and just because uh, you don't think they have a great case that it'll evaporate, that's the danger, you know. If you look at I spent my background is technical primarily, right? But if you talk, whether that's in uh, digital security, internet security, or even normal physical security, you know what they'll say is the point in which you're the most exposed and the most dangerous is when you have that feeling that you're invincible.
Mm.
Like that's when you're really exposed.
Yeah, I
And
hear it, and I think about a lot of folks, it's like Bitcoin is not a certainty. Nothing is a certainty,
mhm,
and so when people get and
yeah,
they rest on their laurels and they think, "Yeah, no problem, it's just, Bitcoin doesn't care, TikTok next block." Yes, and we have to keep moving forward to defend, and I that's what
right.
I'm an adversarial thinker for sure, and I'm somebody who doesn't I mean, as much as I'm all rainbow and all the good stuff, it's just like, I'm this way because this is a vision I wanna help create and build, but it doesn't come without a lot of proof of work and effort and, making sure you're not just, "Do, do, do, everything's just great." Like, anything needs to have maintenance, and it needs to have forethought, and it needs to have diligence and cooperation, to make it go forward. So, okay, so let's talk about, so number 1, we were talking about ordinals, we were talking about, how this could be a threat. So 4 more, we're talking about centralization risk, we're talking about block space scarcity, we're talking about attack of the government on coin joins and self-custody, and then we'll talk about CBDCs. But I love apathy. That's one of the biggest things. I think in anything, we're seeing this obviously on all these college campuses all over the country,
Yeah,
"Oh, it's no big deal." It's like, "No, this is a big deal, guys."
right.
Um, so, all right, let's jump into centralization risks.
Sure. Sure.
So, you want to share like why is this? Obviously, you're a
Yeah.
proponent of uh, not big public companies for mining. Like, what? Let's talk about
Yeah.
centralization and why such a big deal.
Yeah. One of the core tenets of Bitcoin obviously is decentralization, right? And there's this design, if you're familiar with the blockchain trilemma, with decentralization and security and scalability, right?
Mhm,
And Bitcoin being, at least to my knowledge, the first time in history that the trilemma was solved with decentralization as the key attribute. Security is kind of a given, foregoing, at least at the base layer, scalability. However, the world pushes toward centralization, right? And that, I think, unabated, not just Bitcoin, but I mean,
things.
everything, I think,
Yeah.
pushes itself toward it. It's not typically the natural course of human societies and
Mhm,
structure. So that's certainly true in mining. Mining started, some of you may not know this, but historically, if you go back to the beginning, there was no difference between a node and a miner. Those were exactly the same thing. So
okay.
um, and what ended up happening was, so everybody was both a miner and a node. Then over time, as the economics of mining got more difficult, some of the people essentially turned off. They had the capability in their system, but they would turn off the mining part and just become a node. And then that kind of changed where they traditionally became two pieces of hardware, two different hardware. The node became one piece of hardware and the miner
Mhm,
became another. And but all through that period, it really wasn't something that commercial enterprises largely pursued. It
mhm,
was done at the individual level. If you read Satoshi's early works, while he did have the concept of farms and things potentially coming, his vision, I think he was a little wrong on it, it's okay, was that his view was that millions of people would be heating their houses with their mining equipment, and that the network would stay decentralized because of that. What has happened in large part since the China mining ban. So this is kind of one of those interesting things. I think the unintended consequences of events, right? So when the China mining ban happened, I think a lot of people look at the first order effect of it, which was we moved from 50 to 60% of the hash power being in China, which most of the people in the Western world look at skeptically with caution, and it moved it into other markets that they feel more comfortable. So that was really good. It also led to a massive period of profitability in the mining industry, and then a massive scramble to raise capital to get big as fast as possible. Okay, so because these and so the what I would call the traditional capitalists, I think if you look at the public mining companies, I'm not saying this in this vein as a criticism, just stating it as factually, the people and the impetus behind most of the public mining companies were people coming from Wall Street, finance, capital backgrounds, and a couple from the energy sector. But they're kind of big. So if you'll indulge me, they're largely Wall Street capitalist kind of people. Okay. Not the plebs who were doing the early mining. Okay, the plebs in the early days of mining were all very ethos-centric people. These people were looking at it as a way of justifying massive capital raises, and it led to a whole bunch of companies going public very quickly. And more than we have time for today, but it led to them, in my opinion, going public way too quickly, not being prepared for it. Evidence of that would be what happened with Core Scientific, the largest mining company going bankrupt less than a year after it went public. But public companies in today's world, the way the market reacts today, their stock price has very little to do with their profitability. In fact, they're almost all very unprofitable. It has to do with growth. The market responds to growth. So their market cap and the executive incentives that go with that are all tied to stock price and market capitalization, not to creating sustainable, profitable operating entities. Additionally, they have nothing to do with whether or not the Bitcoin ethos is adhered to. So I'm going to roll back to ordinals and inscriptions to a certain degree. Okay. Basically, the public mining companies to a T have all been either supportive or silent about that vector, about what's happening with ordinals. It has led to a great rise in fees, and it has driven a lot of mining revenue. So all of these forces, though, push capital at a massive rate into a small number of companies. And this creates imbalance within the hash rate of the industry. I wrote an article. We won't have time for it today, but those of you who want to search for it, it's in Bitcoin Magazine. It's called Satoshi's Heel, and it talks about the risk of that. But it basically creates a capture opportunity for a nation state down the road. We're not there today. I don't want anybody to lose sleep tonight, but we need to make sure that we have balance, that the pleb miners that I call rabbits, and the horses, which would be companies like Barefoot, small to medium-sized commercial miners, have a certain balance in the ecosystem relative to the elephants, which is what I call the big guys, right? If you have a world of only elephants, one of the things I'll say about elephants is they're easy to identify and they're easy to hunt, right? So So, and that could be shut them down. That could be force OFAC compliance. That could be like those sorts of things that become very easy within the industry. Now, there's a second layer though, which is mining pools. So this will sound funny. We call companies like Riot or CleanSpark mining companies, but the reality is they're not miners. They are hashers. And there's a distinction. A hasher in today's world simply is renting hash power to a mining pool. The mining pool is actually the one that connects to the Bitcoin network, the one that finds blocks, collects block rewards, and I'm not saying this is actually happening, but a company like Riot really doesn't even know what work the pool is giving them. They know they are being assigned work. They really don't know what that work is. It could be Bitcoin Cash. It could be Bitcoin. It could be something completely unrelated to Bitcoin. They're getting compensated based on the performance of the Bitcoin network, but they really don't even know what they're working on. So at the pool level, there are only about 15 pools in the world now. And 90% of the hash rate is attached to 6 of them.
Wow.
And those 6 companies create what's called the block template. So in every block, somebody has to pick for that pool what transactions they're going to try to process. Okay, so if the mempool has 200,000 transactions that need to be put into a block to be confirmed and add to the chain, in any one block, about 4,000 are going to go in. So somebody has to pick the 4,000, and they have to have a criteria by which they pick the 4,000. Now, some people will call that filtering. Some people will call that censoring. I call that filtering. Just there has to be a decision criteria by which you pick 4,000 out of the 200,000. And as in my mind, as long as you are not directly violating the property rights of an individual, or maybe stated a better way, if you're not excluding transactions because of who is sending them, then you're not censoring, then you're filtering. If what you're doing is saying, well, I don't like Val, I can associate these addresses with her, I'm never gonna pick her. I don't care how much fees she puts in or attached to that fee. To me, that's censorship. And if I don't pick it, if I don't know who you are or care who you are, and I'm just picking it based on an economic reason, or I could pick whatever criteria I want though. But I guess to get back to the theme, these 6 places, this is way too many. Those 6 companies are in the US, Foundry and Luxor, and then 4 Chinese pools. See if I can get them. Ant Pool, Poolin, F2 Pool, and Binance. So what's even more scary is it appears that while there are separate, the Chinese pools, it appears they are separate, they pick exactly the same block templates. So there's a belief that they are at a minimum cooperating in somewhat of an oligopoly type arrangement. And so that's very scary. To me, this is very scary. I am on the board of directors at Ocean. I'm an investor in Ocean, and I don't want this to be an Ocean pitch, but I'll just say that
it's okay.
The reason that I did that, obviously, I think we can make money. I think we can do well, right? So I'm an investor too, but we can help solve this problem. And but I want other pools too. I hope there's somebody out there right now saying, I have an idea for a better way to do a pool. Wonderful. Do it, please. We need it. So this is an important one. This probably presents the near term the highest near-term risk to Bitcoin, in my opinion, is this.
This.
And yeah, and it's not existential to Bitcoin, like Bitcoin won't work, but it's existential to Bitcoin maintaining all of its qualities of
Mhm.
borderless and, uh, you know,
Uncensorable and
uncensorable and all that sort of
decentralized
stuff.
everything, yeah.
Yeah,
It
that part, yeah.
and especially if it's underneath the Chinese at this
Mhm.
point. I mean, I'm not interested in having them in any of my transactions in my life,
Yeah,
but
right.
I know they are.
Yeah,
And yeah, that's a
yeah,
terrifying thing. And so
yeah,
Ocean, you're saying what Ocean is up to is helping to create a near-term solution for this.
yeah. And what we will do, I know it's a little bit technical, is instead of right now, Ocean offers 4 different templates instead of just all the none of the other pools even publish what their template is and their decision criteria. You just sign up and blindly allocate your hash rate. You don't even know what their decision criteria is.
Wow.
In the short term, Ocean publishes 4 different templates and each with different criteria, and each miner that comes into the pool can decide which of the 4 they wish. And one, by the way, filters out all the spam. Another one, by the way, lets it all in. So even though Ocean and people like me that are associated with it are very anti-spam, if you want to mine with our pool, you can pick one that essentially will almost maximize spam because we believe the freedom and importance of being a block template creator and diversity there is even more important than the threat of the spam.
Okay.
So, for us to be it would be improper for us to be the final arbiter of all this. So we express our opinion, we'll tell you why, but still you get to make the choice. In the long run though, and by the way, the long run I mean like a little bit later this year, instead of Ocean picking the templates, each miner can pick their own. So
Cool.
Barefoot will have its template, and we have hundreds of other miners in the pool already. They can each pick their own. Well, then we start building some censorship resistance, right? Because no outside entity can even go to Ocean and say, "Hey, we want you to enforce a certain type of template." All they can say is, "Well, you're going to have to go find the other 500 people mining with our pool and talk to them. And by the way, Ocean doesn't collect any information. So when you sign up for the pool, all you do is you give us the address that you want your rewards directed to. So there's really nothing that Ocean can do to help anybody identify any of the individual miners.
Good. And are you seeing anything with, because I always, again, I'm not a miner, but I thought about, okay, I live in the cold, I live in Colorado, and I'm like, okay, great, I want to have, the Bitcoin
Yeah,
heaters and all that, and I see some companies popping up with some home heating. I mean, and obviously it's a tiny bit of hash rate compared to what you're looking at, obviously at a big,
yeah.
facility. Um, do you feel like we have an opportunity with these types of projects that could, get into people's houses, get into, a gym where they're going to go use the heat for the sauna or the laundromat or the jacuzzi or any of that like heat repurposing. Do you feel like we have an opportunity here that really is going to put a dent in this?
The opportunity exists. Um, it will require to really hit scale and be meaningful.
Mhm.
It's going to require, in my opinion, more ASIC participants. And by ASIC, remember when I talked about language, the importance of language? Here's something I've
Mhm.
been talking about for several years. ASIC, the term that's used. I don't want to put you on the spot, right? But when I say ASIC, what do you think of?
A Bitcoin miner.
Okay.
I mean, I just think of
So,
that type of specialized
all right.
computer for that particular purpose. I don't think of any other uses for it,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Okay. So please know I'm not picking on you because
No, you're
that's the
not. It's
answer
okay. I'm
I
not
would.
yeah.
So So it's a really dangerous term,
Okay.
and it's being used improperly.
Okay.
Okay. So the common usage is exactly as you've said. People think of an ASIC as what I will call a server, okay, which is an entire system, okay. And what that system is, like an S19 or an S9,
Mhm.
is really another term I would put to it is it's an entropy engine. I know it sounds a little technical, but what it does is it hashes. It doesn't care what it hashes. It
Got
it
it.
hashes.
It's a
Okay,
hash monster.
exactly. Inside, if we're talking about, let's say, an S19 or an S21, there are several hundred chips. Those chips are ASICs. ASIC stands for application specific integrated circuit. So it's a small chip typically that has been specifically designed to hash really well. And you put a whole bunch of them into one system, and that becomes the server. Now you could have only one, and some of like the small heating products are doing that sort of thing. But the reason I'm taking you down this is the importance of language. So when we apply the term ASIC to the system, okay, what we are saying is that system is application specific. That language becomes an attack vector. If you are a regulator or a tax authority and you say there's an S19, it is an application specific device, it can only mine Bitcoin. We don't like Bitcoin. And so if you turn that thing on, every watt that goes through it, we want a tax on it. Or we're not even going to allow you to turn it on because it is application specific. The truth
Mm.
is that it's just a hashing machine, and there's lots of applications of hashing. In fact, I'm going to be launching here like really, really soon several new websites that use the hash power of those machines in ways completely unrelated to Bitcoin.
Okay.
Now, I I do that for two reasons. I started this project because I wanted to create insulation so that if a regulatory body or some bureaucrat came into whether it's one of my operations or one of the other miners in the world, even the big guys, that they could say, well, we're just these are just hashing machines. In reality, they could be doing one of dozens of things.
Yeah.
And it's no different than your computer, which by the way, you and I are both on computers at the moment. We could be mining Bitcoin on our I have a MacBook. I could be mining on my MacBook Pro right now.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be terribly economically fruitful, but I could. Just like I can run Excel or PowerPoint. So if you want to legislate, you're essentially telling me what software I can run on my computer and that you will tax me or imprison me or whatever based on the software choice I make. I think that's a pretty tough nut to sell.
This is so important. And so you're also obviously on the board of advisor for Satoshi Action Fund. And so
Yes.
that
Correct.
is I love this framing of this because you're right. I think people, these legislators don't understand. And if they only think that it can only do this one thing, then they think they can outlaw it or regulate it in a way
Yeah.
that's unfair.
Yeah.
So I like this
Yeah. So
more
don't hand them on
neutral.
and I please don't. I'm not picking on you because so many people do it, but I'm trying really hard to
No.
change the vernacular because it's wrong, by the way. So again, I'm not picking. It's wrong to call it an ASIC because an ASIC is a chip, an application specific integrated circuit. It's not specific to Bitcoin, by the way. ASICs. I worked on an ASIC in 1988 for charging control of a laptop. Okay, so ASICs ASICs are in every TV and every car and every electronics device has ASICs in it.
And so what would we, instead of us calling these things ASICs, what's the right term? What do we say? What do we start how do we start
I would
educating ourselves and each other and our audiences so that obviously the legislators start
yeah.
understanding what they're, dealing with?
I think you can call it generically a server. I mean, I think you can, which I think is a great way to say it because it's really just not that different than any other computer in any other data center. If you want to call it a hashing server, you can call it an entropy engine. Um, those are all terminologies I have. If you, but I would stay away from ASIC, and I have to help myself too because I have certain habits. I get caught myself. Like I really don't even want to use the word mining to describe it because that reinforces this application specific um, mentality.
Mhm.
So, but as a community, if what we do is all the literature and the vernacular of the community calls those hashing servers ASICs. I mean, can you just imagine Elizabeth Warren is on some sort of panel or she's speaking in front of Congress, and she'll use our own words against us to say, "Hey, this person called that piece of equipment an ASIC. And by the way, did you know ASIC means application specific?" And then so there's a trail there. So language is important, right? Like that's
Yeah.
kind of a maybe a theme today.
No, it's a
And
super theme. I'm loving it because it is. It shapes reality, obviously, and
mhm,
it shapes what we're thinking and acting upon. And so that this is extreme. I love this. I love that you brought up 1984 too to talk about this. So, um, this is cool. We need to do some more. Like maybe we could do a spaces, and talk about the vocabulary and ASICs and why this is an issue that we should
sure, we can
start
do
to
that.
have more dialogue with
Mhm.
all of the folks that would benefit from. I mean, obviously everybody would benefit from shifting the vocabulary concept, but I think if we really are going to address this from that lens, I think there needs to be a lot more conversations, and a
Yeah.
lot more consensus around like, maybe we should think this way so that we don't get stuck in a hole over here with Miss Warren and at all.
Yeah.
um,
And by the
yeah,
way, in Europe, like you mentioned coming at this from a human rights perspective. Well,
right.
I just it was last week I submitted a 20-page testimonial through the Open Dialogue Foundation in
Yay,
Europe.
Ludmilla. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
amazing.
And they're doing great work on the front lines, but uh, the the attack is on the reason I'm saying this is it's not just Elizabeth, the attack is on a
Right.
global basis. And the bullshit that we're fighting, and I'm just one guy, I'm doing my best, but just our words are being critiqued continually. And if,
Mhm.
if you're somebody out there that has any prominence or voice in the community, they are watching you and they are listening to you and they're waiting for you to say the wrong thing. And they will twist it in really bad ways. And so I'm doing my best. And then but then again we have to fight because the people like Alex DeVries, the judge economist guy,
Mhm.
um, I guess this is another, we talked about the threats to the future of Bitcoin. I don't know if we can get to all of them, but there's another one, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
have these people who are spreading disinformation.
Yep.
We can't just assume it goes away. I mean, and so
No, it doesn't go away. Well, and it leaves a residue of FUD, and I've been last year I went to a lot of different environmental conferences um, with my partner, and anytime we would bring up Bitcoin, people would freak out, and it's always the normal, "Oh my god, it's boiling the
yeah,
oceans," and
yeah,
blah,
yeah.
blah, blah, and, and I look at those types of things like a lie is like a red drop of dye that goes into a clear glass of water, and
Oh,
it
I like that.
the
I like that.
whole glass of water is now polluted with this red dye, and so in
Yeah,
order for us to get the water clear again, you have to put 100, 1,000x of that clear water to make it appear
to
clean
dilute it. Yeah,
again, and
yeah,
so, I think of adversarial conversations, you can just drop all those things out there And then
Yeah.
they know that they're leaving us on the back foot going, uh-oh, now we've got to go get that 100x, 1000x of the truth to counteract. And so I feel like there's so much, and again, these are words, this is language, and
Yes.
it just takes a little bit of the manipulation and the fear and the people who have certain incentives to take Bitcoin down, um, and not have a free way for us to exchange value as humans. It, it's a lot, and I think young people need to really get that too, because that apathy you were speaking of earlier,
Right.
um, it's easy as, um, a young person, it's easy as somebody who's, full of vim and vigor and the whole thing, like, yeah, fuck the system, blah, blah, it's just like, yeah. And
Yeah.
there's real people out there with real power and money that do not want this to succeed. That's why Satoshi said bye bye. Right. And so
Yeah.
this is what we're seeing obviously right now. And I think there's a lot more to come, but let's chat. Let's wrap it up with two other, and these
Yeah.
could obviously be a whole episodes all by themselves. So we can
Yeah.
we can
Okay.
we can
Yeah.
thumbtack it and do some more down the road. But um, you know, talking about attacks with coin joins and self custody and which I think is going to be an impetus to bring in CBDCs as an excuse, down the road. So let's talk about what's going on. Obviously, with Samurai, we just now saw that Wasabi Wallet is changing what
Yeah.
they're doing, and uh, I think I'm like, oh, if I go to Safeway and I give them some dollars, is their cash register a coin joiner? It's just
Sure.
ridiculous, like what's going on. But I understand the fear and what's happening here. So, um, removing the ability for people to have private transactions in less traceability is scary, because the people who are, whether you're a human rights person who needs Bitcoin that's, to receive payments like Open Dialogue Foundation and those guys, or whether you're
Yeah.
a domestic violence person who is trying to escape a partner who's beating them up.
Right.
Like, you don't want them to know that you're getting Bitcoin and moving all this stuff around. You need to have some level of privacy. And so they don't seem to understand why this is such a big deal, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so you want to talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's a can of worms, and we've
Yeah.
seen even one step kind of removed from that. Not a fan of Roger Ver, but
Yeah.
he got arrested. CZ, not a fan of him either, but he just got sentenced.
Yeah.
Um, some of these people, I'm not going to say which ones. Some of them probably did some things that were probably less than forthright or on the up and up. But I also think that it's clear that the opponents of Bitcoin, the opposition of Bitcoin, is stepping up their game.
Yeah.
That the threat becomes more real. That it is more real. They will be more vigilant, I think, in their attack.
Yeah.
This is, I think they perceive this as one of the easier attack vectors. Um, I think the problem the community has is one of education to a certain degree. Like, I don't think the community has a great grasp of what's really happening on the underlying layer. Um, whether it's a coin join or there's techniques like there's something called a pay join. That's a really cool concept. Um, at the end of the day, though, I think what's very interesting is that the battle that we're talking about is one that's more like 50 or 50 or more years old. And it's about really what rights do we have, your human rights, like what rights do we have as individuals to privacy? Why why have we tolerated as a society for 50 years and go back to the Bank Secrecy Act of 1970? Like why did we allow here in the US at least the presumption of guilt to be associated with certain actions, because that's how I look at it. Like, so a cash transaction of $10,000 or more, there is essentially a presumption of guilt
Yeah.
that goes with that. And all of this stuff comes back to that. Like, in other words, because bad guys, whoever they are, occasionally act a certain way, we will presume guilt on everybody who does something that acts that way, and impose things, restrictions and barriers on their life. And so I I'm hopeful that maybe the general public, even outside of Bitcoin, can somehow get riled up about that, because that's the basis of all that. They're taking what I think is an unjust law in the fiat world, and now they're trying to come after us because they realize that their ability to impose that same unjust law um, is more difficult, right? Yeah.
No, go ahead. Keep going.
I believe that technically they're unfounded, and that I'm not saying just me. I think there are several people in the community. I think, given the right amount of time to prepare a case, we could go in front of the Supreme Court and we could explain to them why what they're the criminal acts that they're trying to impose, and the way that wallet works, the way the Bitcoin mechanics work, these same things do not apply. For instance, like, here's a simple one. Like, I'll get really abstract to a certain degree. None of us own any Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So we only happen to know addresses associated with some Bitcoin. I happen
Right.
to know some. It's different than the ones you have, and my ability to guess where yours is I'd spend the rest of my life with all the world's computing power, and I still couldn't find it. But that's different. So I really don't own it. I just know where it is, and that gives me the right to use it. But anybody else that figured out where it was could use it. So it's very different than I have $1,000 in my checking account. So I don't know if people followed me, but that's a very bit of an abstraction. So a wallet is really just managing, helping somebody manage those locations. It's really not doing anything else. So therefore, I think by extension, everything else is false. Like, all of the all of the basis that there should be some regulation of these wallets, and that there's a transfer going, like, so they've used these words like, I think you saw that, right, probably, with a USB cable versus a iron
Yeah.
pan
And the
versus
pan and the
all
whole
that.
thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think it all falls apart, but it's probably going to end up in a Supreme Court. It's probably going to end up there a long time in the future. And then the question will be, because I feel 100% confident that we are in the right. The question is, will the court still rule properly? And we're talking about some things that are kind of a difficult abstraction, especially if you've lived in this fiat world in a certain way. So you have to. I think it takes somebody being in the Bitcoin world probably several years deep in the rabbit hole to start grasping the abstract concept, and then the technical mechanisms that support the abstract concept, to say that they can't do that.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily have faith that, for instance, the U.S. Supreme Court, which is where I think it will ultimately land, is going to get it in the end.
Well, is there anything we can do to educate them a little bit more and, like,
Yeah,
obviously this is a big deal, and
yeah,
I don't know the right answers. Obviously,
yeah,
we're all trying to figure this
yeah,
out as we go, and we have to be mature about this. This isn't just,
yeah,
okay, I'm going to go, saber rattling over here. Like, we're up against the powers that be that want to stay in power.
yeah.
and then they've got all this support system that wants to keep them in power. And, we can go down the whole rabbit hole of how that all works, but that's another, I
Yeah.
think, another conversation. But, um, do you feel like we've got an opportunity here because it hasn't gotten that far? Obviously with Dennis and Satoshi Action Fund and everything that's going out there, like
Oh,
what
yeah.
can we what can we do as individual plebs,
Yeah.
to help educate the people who are going to start, making different types of decisions?
Well, in the US, I think there are three organizations doing very important work. You mentioned one, Satoshi Action Fund, and I am an advisor
Hmm.
from day one. I supported Dennis and what he did from day one.
Cool.
Um, the folks at the Digital Chamber, Perry Ann, and
Yeah.
they do very important work. Maybe even a little, in this case, maybe even more important because the Satoshi Action Fund tends to be a little more state local focused, and
Okay.
the Digital Chamber, and then the Bitcoin Policy Institute, all
Yeah.
three of
BPI.
those. So to the degree people can support those organizations financially, or look at them and the politicians that they are supporting. Because there are a handful that do get it, and it's very
Hmm.
important that they rise up to the appropriate levels. And in Europe, obviously we have, I mentioned ODF and what they're doing. You know, there's a massive amount of education there. And like, just as an example, I said I wrote this testimony. I had to write a significant part of the testimony I wrote was because there is a major faction that's already infiltrated the EU and the ECB, saying that proof of work
Yeah.
can be completely supplemented by proof of stake, because proof of stake does everything equal to or better than proof of work without using any energy. Okay, that we are behind the eight ball, and as you said, I really liked your analogy with the red dye. So people like me are in there working with like the ODF, trying to push back,
Dilute
to
dilute the
dilute,
poison. Yeah.
and it's nobody's fault, but the opponents are well funded, very motivated, and very connected, right? So you know, we don't have great rallying points. Like when I was at Gateway, we had a whole government relations group,
Yeah.
and I would work with them, but they were literally based in DC, and they were very well funded, and they worked with other lobby groups in the personal computer industry, and it
Yeah.
was very coordinated. We really don't have that. And so I hope we get our shit together, because it is a real threat.
It's a
And
huge threat. And is there anything that you've seen, like, to coordinate these organizations in a more effective way and also to rally us plebs?
oh, not yet. I mean, to be honest, I think this is an area that there's a lot of work required. What I will say though is there's two things. Is how do we fight it, like at the nation state level? And I
Mhm.
think those groups are the best chance we have of that happening. Um, I've worked with all of them at some level, made contributions to all of them, both financially and with information or testimonials or things like that. Um, so I would ask other people to do what you can. If that's send them $5, great. That helps. But the other thing you can do is prepare yourself personally. I mean, so at a minimum, do that. So um, you know, have good practices. I know it sounds very, I don't know, cliche at this point. Get your fucking keys off the exchanges.
Yeah.
Get your coins off the exchanges. Hold your private keys. Learn how to use things like go do a search on PayJoin as an example,
Okay.
and you can see that you, with just a little bit of effort, can create something that's like a coin join that has none of the outside appearances of a coin join. That is it, it's a beautiful concept, and if you start doing some of your on-chain work using something like a pay join, um, you don't have the same exposures that maybe you would have.
All right. So keys off exchange, of course, we know that. Pay
Yeah.
join, support these organizations, um, run a node.
Well,
That
yeah, thank you for saying that. Yes.
yeah,
Run a
run a
node.
node.
Hell, become a miner.
Yeah,
Join us at Ocean later this year and create your own block templates. Help pick the transactions you think are right. You wanna pick the ones that are the oldest, the smallest, ones that are only initiated on Tuesdays. You decide. I don't care. Um, but create a different decision set. Yeah.
I love it. And then, all right, we'll wrap up here. But we'll save the fifth one. We'll save CBDCs another time. I don't think that's the
Okay.
attack on Bitcoin necessarily. I just think it's going to be something that I do believe it's an attack from the perspective of convincing the world this is good for you and Bitcoin is bad for you. And I think that there's going
Yeah.
to be a lot of more misinformation, more misleading, and oh, Bitcoin is used for terrorists or all the shit that they're trying to do,
Sure.
And I think you had mentioned about why do we let them do this thing with with the Bank Secrecy Act and the privacy and the property. I think I have an old teacher, like I do a lot of meditation and personal growth and stuff. And one of my teachers, he was just like, everybody out there is walking around with their umbilical cords out and they're looking for mommy and their mommy. Are you my mommy? Are you my daddy? And we as
Yeah.
humans, we're going out there looking for that security, that nanny,
Yeah.
that figure.
Sure.
And so whether it's what happened with COVID, whether it's what's going on with this and our ability to have privacy and property rights, um, people just want to defer the responsibility to something and someone else that's perceptually bigger and more knowledgeable and more powerful, because like a lot of people think like, well, the doctors must know, so I'm just going to do what they say, or the bankers must know because they're got
Yeah.
millions of dollars and I'm just a guy over here working at McDonald's,
Right.
so we've given our sovereignty and our minds over to this authority figure because of that umbilical cord being out, and then we want to just go get back to business and have a barbecue and drink a beer and watch Netflix, and that's by design to perpetuate that mindset
Yeah.
so that we're not thinking clearly and standing up for ourselves. And so I think words are so powerful and we need to be very masterful with them, and
Right.
understand this. And so I love that you brought this up and I love how we're wrapping this up in words and our vocabulary. So we're going to have some fun with that on this, this next round. Um, do you have any final words for folks? I'm going to after this interview with you, which has been a blessing, and I'm so grateful we've got to spend this time together. Um, Maya Parbo is going to be on with me here in about 5 minutes, and she's
Okay.
a presidential candidate
Yeah.
for Suriname, and she's also doing some stuff with Bitcoin and real estate and helping some people in Latin America there. So I'm
Yeah.
interested to see how this is going to go with her. It's totally two very amazing people. So, um,
Well, yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I'm anxious to see that one too because I actually follow her.
cool.
I think that the development of Bitcoin in these in countries like Suriname is wonderful. I think
Yeah.
that is one of the greatest defense mechanisms we have, by the way,
Yeah.
is adoption, and especially in the second and third world. If the second and third world starts saying "fuck you" to the IMF and the World Bank and the establishment system, just like El Salvador has, and
Yeah.
my wife's home country is the Philippines, and we're really hoping like that country can can rally around it because we know it can lift them out of this. Um, I guess you asked me kind of closing. I'll just say this. I do what I do um, because I believe we have a chance to create money for the next 1,000 years.
Yeah.
And, that is a system our grandkids, our great grandkids, and generations beyond, they can live in a world of freedom and peace and, fairness. And, that's, I think, the greatest gift we can give them.
Yeah.
Um, I'm all for making money. I think, capitalism done properly is great, but I try to live the ethos of Bitcoin. I try to run my company in the ethos of Bitcoin because the end of the day, that 1,000 years of money is a lot more important to me than whatever I make. And I hope in general the Bitcoin community adopts some sort of spirit like that. That the people are here for that reason. Because I think if you take that mentality, then then we're going to win. And we taught today's theme was threats. Take the threats seriously and
Yeah.
fight for them. But know that in the end, we do have the upper hand. If we screw it up, if it gets screwed up and it doesn't work, it's it's our own fault. The blueprint is there. We just have to not fuck it up.
Excellent ending words. Yeah, we're not gonna and I think thanks to people like you out there who aren't just backing down and going, "It's okay, don't worry," like, and you're obviously classy and intelligent in the way that you're communicating to everybody, and that matters a lot. So, um, yeah, don't give up the fight, everybody. We're just literally getting started.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks again, Bob. I really appreciate what you're doing out there in the space, and I want to keep supporting you in any way that I can, and we'll keep rocking it out there and fighting the good fight. So I got to
All
get
right.
my home miner here set up. So yay. Right on. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in, and make sure you go follow Bob at boomer_BTC on Twitter. And you guys can also go check out Barefoot Mining and learn more about Bitcoin. Check out Satoshi Action Fund and Ocean, and we'll have everything in the show notes for you. But until next time, everybody, peace, love, and warm aloha. And thanks again, Bob, for taking time to share what's going on here. And we'll talk to you guys soon.